I've been fiddling with angles for a couple minutes now. And I haven't got set up fully before starting this. Ooh, that's going to be a problem. But this is a perfectly good opportunity to show you my lovely notebook decorations here. I put a bunch of stickers. I have more stickers, but then I also put an envelope here to hold some of my pre-writing stuff when I thought I would only have a little bit of pre-writing things before they got their own notebook, which is also in need of a facelift so that it doesn't say The Lion King anymore. But I thought since I am more or less planning a story, I would talk about how I plan stories while I put some work in on this map. So I'm going to pause for just a moment so that I can set up these things in the position they were before, and then I'll return so that I can start on this map and I can talk about planning books. This is what we're working with right now. I couldn't decide where a bunch of things were going to be, so I just cut them out in little pieces of paper and shuffled them around until they looked about right. So I'm going to try to draw something sort of like this to work with for the storytelling. Now, nervous about the angle. Hopefully, this video will not be boring. It's a very rainy day, and I'm kind of low energy, so I'm not going to be as excited and maybe manic as I am sometimes. But slower, more chill videos are also good, and hopefully this will be cozy and not boring. Usually this kind of thing I like to put on in the background, like while I'm folding laundry or doing chores or playing a game or something. So maybe this can be very helpful and it can play in the background while you're doing something else. So I'm going to draw my map, and we're going to talk about how I plan out stories. Overall, this is not a tutorial. This is not a how-to. This is how I do things. It can sometimes be fun to see how somebody else's process works, and sometimes it can give you new ideas. So that's mostly what this is for. And for the non-writers in our midst, hello! I haven't forgotten you. If you don't write stories, this is how some of us do it. So get your cup of tea, get your laundry. Let's work on some stuff together and talk about stories. First, I have an idea. I usually get an idea from watching movies or reading books or music, but the general rule is that there's usually already some kind of story being told, because life is stories, right? You tell stories about people that you know and things that happened, and we write stories about life because life is more or less effectively made up of stories. So usually there's some kind of existing story to be had. When I think of something for myself, I'll go, oh, well, I wish they'd done this in this movie, or oh, wouldn't it be cool if they'd done this in this book? And so I take those, and sometimes I write them down, and sometimes they just percolate around in my mind for a little bit. And the interesting thing is if I am, that should be bigger. If I don't write it down, one of two things will happen. Either it's not a very good idea, or it gets boring, so it disappears, and it disappears forever, which isn't a terrible thing. Or what else can happen is that it'll just eat at me for a really long time. And when it does eat at me for a really long time, usually that means there's something there. There's something to be writing about, more or less. I put that landmark much too close to the castle, and it is... We're going to pretend that we didn't. And this story in particular, the one that I'm working with, the night story, it is just such a idea where it was sitting in the back of my mind, and I thought about it for a while, and I went, oh, what the heck. I guess I'll write it now. And I think, honestly, most of the things that I've written has been something like that. Either it's something that ate at me for a while, or I wrote it down and came back to it and went, yeah, that's a pretty good idea. So I have my idea, and then It drives me mad until I write it is effectively what I'm trying to say. That should cut off like that away, I guess. Difficulty is being a person who does not actually know that much about terrain and trying to draw terrain. But this is just a rough map. This is just for my benefit, so that I know roundabout where things are. So if the story eats at me for long enough that it, seems important to write the ideas down, they'll get written down, and skeptical about the direction this river is taking. And usually at that point it gets its own notebook. So I have a variety of notebooks here that various things are happening in. So this brown one here with all the cute stickers in it, that one is the drafting notebook for the night story. It's kind of a fun, creative little side project that will hopefully one day be a real project. But that one, that's where the draft happens, and any other notes on the story, what would usually be the only notebook, is the notes notebook. And I also have these here with me. These are all of the notebooks for Scorch. So Robbing Centaurs, World Saving, and Dragonfire. All of their notes are here in my varying levels of terrible handwriting over the years. There's a reason I used to have a blog, and it was called Scribbled Fiction, and it's because my handwriting is terrible. And also Jo from Little Women would always refer to her writings as her scribblings. So I called my blog Scribbled Fiction because of my terrible handwriting and because of Jo March. So at that point I get a notebook and I write things down. It's not always a notebook. Usually it is, but once upon a time, while working on Skyboats, well, I'm still working on Skyboats, while working on Skyboats anyway, I had a Google Docs document where I wrote, so far that document full of notes is 31,000 words, which is long enough for a short book all by itself, and I think that's really funny. But that's the amount of words that it takes for me to figure out exactly what I'm trying to write. So, yeah, about 30,000 words got me through 2 drafts. 2 drafts. And still so many more to go. So many more. That canyon is ugly. I keep having to remind myself that this is not a real map. It's just a kind of pseudo pretend map that's not real. The aforementioned rain is having its moment. But in the notebooks, I write down character things. I write who the people are. I figure out who the people are. I write about characters and places, the history behind the places, the culture, what little culture I'm able to cook up. I feel like my cultures are not very good quite yet. I'm learning from many other excellent writers who are very good at writing cultures. Really, the writing of notes, it's a bit of a muddle for a while. It's sort of everything happening at once because you try to write about one character. Well, I'm going to specifically talk about what I'm working on right now. A couple days ago, I was trying to write about this other knight, this guy named Matthias, and I was trying to figure out like his calling, his purpose, and I couldn't work that out because I didn't really know anything about how the Knights of his order worked, how the Stone Knights worked. So I had to go back and write about the Stone Knights, and then I realized I didn't know how to write about the Stone Knights because I didn't know what kind of magical stone and processes it takes to manufacture one of these Stone Knights, because they're something like a fancier golem, like you know how a golem is made of stone? This is like the smartphone of golems. It's just a really intelligent stone life form. So you got a bit of lore out of me. I wasn't intending to talk about lore today. But you have to track back a lot of things, and you have to track back a lot of history. Even to make this map, I had to write a ton of notes, just figuring out what kind of terrain they have and what grows there. And given that this is sort of a sort of a ruins kind of setting. Ruined ruins, yeah, very helpful. But working on that, I realized that almost every location is going to need about 3 layers of history, even to get a start, because I'll need to know what it was like when it was new, what this place was built for, and then how it fell, and then how it's been used or not been used or fallen into disrepair or had a bunch of birds build nests there, what's happened to it since it fell. So there's a lot of tracking things back and muddling and taking notes and asking questions and writing lists. I do a lot of writing lists because my thoughts are not strictly sentence shaped, so I have to write down everything to even figure out what I think about something. That happens a lot. Let me draw a little village over here. Oh, but I should draw the shape of the village so that I know how it works out. Maybe it's centered around a well. Maybe they'll have a well over here. And this process, I feel like I'm talking about the process of the world building and the planning and everything like it's a super chill process. And it's fun, don't get me wrong, it's a very fun process. But it's not a chill process. Honestly, brainstorming for something makes me feel a little bit more like a conspiracy theorist, and I'll be talking to my sister, Rachel, and I'll be texting other writer friends, brainstorming or celebrating what cool ideas I've come up with, or talking about how crazy something is. I'll be just basically like ranting and raving for months while I work on something. And since I have multiple projects on the back burner right now, it's just been a very long time of ranting and raving to my friends. It's a good thing they enjoy my rants. I think they enjoy my rants. If they don't, I'm so sorry. I apologize for what I've done to them. And then the road to Damascus. No. The road would come through here. Yeah, so it's a lot of ranting and raving up until, I feel like I have enough notes written to know something about the story. And I'm writing all of this with the overall story in mind. Like, I know scenes that I want to happen, and I know the vibe of the story and how I want the ending to feel and all of these things. And sometimes in the process of writing down all these ideas and hashing out what may or may not happen in the story and how the world may or may not be, because a lot of it is, very subject to change in that state. I'll also write down like themes, things that I realize the story could be about. Sometimes I'll write like my ideal review, like what I would want someone to say about the story, what kind of effect I want it to have on them. And effects can be different. It can be, sometimes I'll write like, I want this story to not take itself too seriously. I want it to be funny and full of heart. That was my main goal for Scorch. I want it to be funny, but I want it to be heartfelt. Or you have, for Skyboats, I was thinking this morning, I would like people to walk away from this book with the feeling of having just had a hearty meal. I want people to feel like they have had a wholesome experience that has filled them up, and I want people to be able to sit back after they close the book, and I want that moment after you've just had something incredible to eat. That feeling of warmth and satisfaction and pleasure that comes with finishing something that is good. That's the goal for Skyboats. For this one, I'm not sure yet. I know how I want to feel about it, but ultimately I'm not quite sure what I want the goal for this guy to be yet. That was supposed to be a smaller village. It doesn't have to be. This one could be the smaller village. And I know I said before, a lot of things in like the outlining, drafting, whatnot process, well, outlining and planning process, a lot of it is very subject to change But I do mean that a lot of things change, and they can change at any point during the story. So a lot of things are about more finding a event that can take place between a cause and effect, where you end up with this perfectly shaped puzzle piece, like a hole for a puzzle piece, and you have to find the perfect thing to fit right in there that will suit all of your circumstances and effects and make sense for the characters and the point in the timeline, and you have to hunt and peck around until you find something that will suit it. And it almost feels like making a lot of excuses sometimes, but it tends to all work out in the end in some fashion or another. But eventually we always reach a point where put another cliff here. It always reaches a sort of point where I know I can't get anything else done unless I find another plot hole. I know that I have written down everything I can write down, and I won't think of anything else unless I find it in the story. So another thing about how I set up worlds and magic systems and settings and things, I know a lot of people who are very, very good at the world building and culture creating and all that. I do not consider myself to be one of those people. I'm working on being better at settings and things, but for the moment, all of my storytelling things, they kind of boil down to like a movie set almost. I feel like I only create as much world as it takes to fill the story, because if I write more world outside of that, then I'm frustrated that I can't fit it into the story. But that's not properly good storytelling, I think. The whole world exists for the purpose of telling this story, and that's all right, but knowing that there is nothing else to see outside of the 60,000 words that I write in the story seems less than excellent. So, the thing that I'm working on is telling stories that have more meat and, I guess, depth to them. I want to have more depth, more richness, tell quality stories. So, working on that. But getting back to the outlining process, there are like 2 ways that I can go about this. So, put a giant statue here, because why not? So there are 2 ways that I can outline or begin to outline. So either I will just write down a list of scenes that I think will happen in kind of a willy-nilly kind of way. For one story, I have a key ring with a bunch of note cards on it so that I can rearrange them in the way that is suitable to the story as I figure out the story. Or I can also, the other thing I can do is I can write out plot points, key plot points, and then string them together with other scenes that make sense in the same way with the finding an event that fits between a cause and effect kind of way from that we were talking about earlier. So I do that first. So at that point, once I have something rough to work with, I can working on writing it down as more of a narrative, figuring out what character would be where, when, and why. And after the bad thing happens, how do they feel about this and what are they going to do? And things that the characters would do to bond, usually, that sort of thing. Just filling in all of the blank space with things that logically should go there. And after I do that, I try to just flesh out the outline as well as I'm able to make things easier while I'm doing the draft. Once I reach another point where I think there's nothing more I can do, then I call the outline done and I will begin the actual drafting. And that is where I will stop talking about the process for now, because drafting is a completely separate topic and it would probably need its own video if such a thing is desired by you, by me. because even in the drafting process, sometimes the story can change from the outline, and that would be an entirely different topic. But I am about as done with this map as I think it's going to get for now. I may doodle in more landmarks and silliness later. I will show it to you. As I said, it is not a very good map. It just needs to serve a purpose, and some of it is a little bit labeled for my benefit. But at some point later, when this is like an actual hardcore project that I'm working on, then I will draw a real map for it, and then everyone will be very happy, including myself. So I will turn the camera around and show you this silly monstrosity. But bear in mind that my map making skills are better than this. You remember the before. This is our after. This is our new and improved map of this area. Good for us. This was an interesting thing to talk about, and I had a good time talking while I drew, so maybe we'll do more of these in future if this one does well. If not, I am not offended, but if this is a video of the kind that we enjoy, then we can do more of these in the future. But thank you for watching, thank you for being here and being a part of this beloved audience that I appreciate so much, and for how much you care about my books. Thank you for being here, and we will talk again very soon.